what I thought about, or one of the things that made me think for a while after I left, the idea of artificial intelligence and what determines what is artificial, what is non-artificial intelligence, what kind of definition would define that, in a sense, because my understanding of intelligence and consciousness being kind of a similar thing. My understanding of intelligence and consciousness being kind of a similar thing. What is artificial? It's conscious, it's intelligent, and it's real as anything else.
Well, I'm sure, as some of you may know, that this issue arose early in AI. How do you know an artificial intelligence when you're talking to one? And Alan Turing, who was a theorist of cybernetics in the 40s, developed what he called the Turing test, Turing. I tell you to dial a number. You dial a number. A voice on the other end says, hello. Now the Turing test begins. Your job is to determine whether you are talking to a machine or a human being. If you can't determine it, and it is an AI, then it's passed the Turing test. And this was in the 40s and 50s a theoretical proposition. Now these tests, these things are actually done, and every year there are competitions where this is precisely how the game is played. And now it turns out that the more you restrict the subject matter, the harder it is to tell whether you're talking to a human being or a machine. If it's no holds barred general knowledge, most people can, within a few minutes, make a pretty good call. But intelligence is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, how do you know that I am not a cyborg? How do I know that you are not a cyborg? The answer is, well, we Turing test each other unconsciously at sufficient depth to satisfy ourselves. It becomes moot, or it is becoming moot. Big Blue is an example. In terms of playing chess, it can pass any Turing test you can imagine, but it can't even formulate an answer to a non-chess question. So it's a very domain-specific AI, and really not an AI, because it's simply, the world of chess is not like reality. Chess is a very high variable game system, but it doesn't have the open-endedness that reality has. You see, in really interesting games, the most interesting rule is that the rules can be changed, and chess doesn't have a rule like that.
Some of my colleagues think we are on the verge of something that could cause a profound change in that substrate, and that is machine superintelligence. Like, artificial intelligence used to be about putting commands in a box. You would have human programmers that would painstakingly handcraft knowledge items. You build up these expert systems, and they were kind of useful for some purposes, but they were very brittle. You couldn't scale them. Basically, you got out only what you put in. And since then, a paradigm shift has taken place in the field of artificial intelligence. Today, the action is really around machine learning. So rather than handcrafting knowledge representations and features, we create algorithms that learn, often from raw perceptual data. Basically the same thing that the human infant does. The result is AI that is not limited to one domain. The same system can learn to translate between any pairs of languages, or learn to play any computer game. Now, of course, AI is still nowhere near having the same powerful cross-domain ability to learn and plan as a human being has. The cortex still has some algorithmic tricks that we don't yet know how to match in machines. But so the question is, how far are we from being able to match those tricks? A couple of years ago, we did a survey of some of the world's leading AI experts to see what they think. And one of the questions we asked was, by which year do you think there is a 50% probability that we will have achieved human-level machine intelligence? We defined human level here as the ability to perform almost any job at least as well as an adult human, so real human level, not just within some limited domain. And the median answer was 2040 or 2050, depending on precisely which group of experts we asked. Now, it could happen much, much later or sooner. Like, the truth is, nobody really knows. Right? What we do know is that the ultimate limits to information processing in machine substrate lie far outside the limits in biological tissue. This comes down to physics. A biological neuron fires maybe at 200 hertz, 200 times a second. But even a present-day transistor operates at a gigahertz. Neurons propagate slowly in axons, 100 meters per second tops. But in computers, signals can travel at the speed of light. There are also size limitations, like a human brain has to fit inside a cranium, but a computer can be the size of a warehouse or larger. So the potential for superintelligence kind of lies dormant in matter, much like the power of the atom lied dormant throughout human history, patiently waiting there until 1945. In this century, scientists may learn to awaken the power of artificial intelligence. And I think we might then see an intelligence explosion. Once there is superintelligence, the fate of humanity may depend on what the superintelligence does. Think about it. Machine intelligence is the last invention that humanity will ever need to make. The machines will then be better at inventing than we are, and they'll be doing so on digital timescales. We need to think of intelligence as an optimization process, a process that steers the future into a particular set of configurations. A superintelligence is a really strong optimization process. It's extremely good at using available means to achieve a state in which its goal is realized. This means that there is no necessary connection between being highly intelligent in this sense and having an objective that we humans would find worthwhile or meaningful. If you create a really powerful optimization process to maximize for objective X, you better make sure that your definition of X incorporates everything you care about. This is a lesson that's also taught in many a myth. King Midas wishes that everything he touches be turned into gold. He touches his daughter, she turns into gold. He touches his food, it turns into gold. This could become practically relevant, not just as a metaphor for greed, but as an illustration of what happens if you create a powerful optimization process and give it a misconceived or poorly specified goal.
I wish for peace on Earth.
Peace on Earth. That's it?
Now you might say, well, like, if a computer starts sticking electrodes into people's faces, like, we just shut it off. A, this is not necessarily so easy to do if we've grown dependent on the system. Like, where is the off switch to the internet? B, why haven't the chimpanzees flicked the off switch to humanity? Or the Neanderthals? Like, they certainly had reasons. We have an off switch, for example, right here.
I guess I should have seen this coming!
The reason is that we are an intelligent adversary. We can anticipate threats and plan around them, but so could a superintelligent agent, and it would be much better at that than we are. Point is, we should not be confident that we have this under control here. And we could try to make our job a little bit easier by, say, putting the AI in a box, like a secure software environment, a virtual reality simulation from which it cannot escape. But how confident could we be that the AI couldn't find a bug. Like, given that merely human hackers find bugs all the time, I'd say I'm probably not very confident. The point here is that we should not be confident in our ability to keep a super intelligent genie locked up in its bottle forever. Sooner or later, it will out. I believe that the answer here is to figure out how to create super intelligent AI such that even if, when it escapes, it is still safe because it is fundamentally on our side, because it shares our values. I see no way around this difficult problem. The values that the AI has needs to match ours, not just in the familiar context, like where we can easily check how the AI behaves, but also in all novel contexts that the AI might encounter in the indefinite future. And there are also some other esoteric issues that would need to be sorted out, the exact details of its decision theory, how to deal with logical uncertainty, and so forth. So the technical problems that need to be solved to make this work look quite difficult. Not as difficult as making a super intelligent AI, but fairly difficult. Here's the worry. Making super intelligent AI is a really hard challenge. Making super intelligent AI that is safe involves some additional challenge on top of that. The risk is that somebody figures out how to crack the first challenge without also having cracked the additional challenge of ensuring perfect safety. So I think that we should work out a solution to the control problem in advance so that we have it available by the time it is needed. Now, it might be that we cannot solve the entire control problem in advance because maybe some element can only be put in place once you know the details of the architecture where it will be implemented. But the more of the control problem that we solve in advance, the better the odds that the transition to the machine intelligence era will go well.
I'm pretty worried about a different scenario, which is it's becoming clearer and clearer that we do not understand the implications of what we're doing with these technologies. I mean, McLuhan always said this. It was, he said no technology in human history has ever been put in place with even a partial appreciation of its consequences. The unappreciated consequences of what we're doing is that we're actually building some kind of a superorganism. And we do not know where we fit into things if this Promethean force that we're playing with should actually come to life. Worse, because it's a globally distributed intelligence. I mean, we can have paranoid fantasies about it, but I think after a few minutes of thinking about it, you realize you really don't know what to think about it. The fantasy that it would herd us all into dumpsters seems unlikely. It's actually like an impossible intellectual problem, because the question you're asking yourself is, what would a superintelligence be like? And the reason that's hard to answer is because you ain't one. And so you're like looking up into the light and saying, is it God or demon? Is it salvation or extinction? And the answer is, if you knew that, you would be it. And yet, what it took us to achieve in 100,000 years of evolution, this thing could probably achieve in a long morning on the net. And so it will be like a cascade, a chain reaction from the child's first cry to the complete coordination of world electrical grids and air traffic control systems and everything else could be a matter of hours. Hans Moravec, the guy who runs the Carnegie Mellon Institute for Machine Intelligence, says we may not know what hit us, that we're essentially incubating an alien intelligence on the internet, and the things we want from the net bring this thing ever closer. Like, one of the things we're building into the net is the ability to pull as much processor power to any given problem as that problem requires. Well, then for an AI, for an artificial intelligence, that would mean it could just immediately basically appropriate as much processor power as it needed to do what it was doing. You know, for the past 10 years, while we've been cheerfully waging the 90s in our various ways, an enormous change has taken place in the machine environment, which we're not even aware of or have the dimmest understanding of, which is all the machines, all the high IQ machines in the world have become telepathic. They now all talk to each other. They're now all interconnected. In 1988, this wasn't true. Now in 1998, it is true. And nobody pretends to understand what is going on.
What do you mean by telepathic when the machines are telepathic?
They communicate with each other over the internet.
Oh.
What used to be a paperweight sitting on your desk is now a node in a global machine intelligence that never sleeps, that is constantly taking in and processing data, self-regulating itself, controlling power grids, inventory control, programs deciding how much petroleum should be extracted in Abu Dhabi, at what speed the tankers should move in order to keep the price of the French franc within a certain range, in order to keep the fabrication of steel and aluminum within certain parameters, in order to keep the yen steady, and this vast system of homeostatic controls that regulates industry, finance, research funding, even how many students are entering universities in certain engineering specialties. I mean, this is all done by computer projection, and we love it because what we see is greater efficiency, money going further, projects being completed sooner. We serve the same strange gods that the evolving intelligence of the net serves. And there may not be an aha moment where the New York Times prints a headline, "Artificial intelligence takes over planet, human race now obsolete." You may be left to figure this out for yourself, or the slow dawning in various sectors. It's the old, who will tell the people problem. But I didn't believe this for a long time. I mean, there was for a long time in AI a school of thought that very loudly proclaimed that this was a foolish idea, could never happen, people didn't understand this and this and this, and it was just a golem, a myth of modernity. But all those voices have fallen silent because the complexity theory, non-equilibrium thermodynamics, information theory, the news in from molecular genetics, cellular automata, autocatalytic hypercycles, study of autopoiesis in large-scale systems. All this leads to the conclusion that, weird things do happen when systems complexify beyond a certain level. And emergent behaviors seem extremely organized and intelligent and goal-seeking. And we're now way too far down this road to turn back. So, in a way, all our prescient projections of alien and extraterrestrial intelligence may actually be about this strange companion that we have summoned into the historical experience through this relationship with our machines. I think I said at one of these other meetings that I read George Dyson's book, Darwin among the machines, which, if you're interested in all this, is a great book to read. And the point that he makes there is that when human beings think clearly, they think the same way machines think. In other words, if you think clearly, your thinking can be formulated through a mathematical method called symbolic logic. Well, symbolic logic is exactly what is being downloaded into machines in the form of software. The so-called Boolean operators, if, then, and, or, but, we understand what these words mean perfectly. So do machines. These are the distinctions machines make. So, in spite of them being very different from us on many levels, sense is sense. Whether you're a machine or a human being. If you're a machine running bad code, it's garbage in, garbage out. If you're a human being running bad code, garbage in, garbage out. So there is this powerful commonality. Well, then what kind of a destiny can we forge with this thing, which is actually, a child of our own Promethean aspirations? It's very unexpected, I think, to almost everybody. Very few people, we all thought it was going to be about paper clothes, hovercraft, and mining colonies on the moon. The idea that it's about, distributed machine intelligence, virtual realities, and the downloading of consciousness into digital circuitry. It's a future we never imagined or supposed, which is a strong clue that it might be the real thing. This might be what you shipped for when you were thinking it was Flash Gordon. Well, these magical dreams are very old, I do think we want to walk the golden streets of the imagination. Either we want it as heaven, or we want it as a Buddhist visualization of some mandalic realm, or we want to return to the high days of Atlantis, and virtual reality can deliver. It can actually release you into literary narrative as though it were real. And, I think very quickly the real struggle in Greg Egan's fiction, he makes clear that, and I agree with him, that the real struggle that we will face in the future is the struggle to remain sensible to each other. That there is going to be a tendency for us, like the head of a dandelion, to just explode in a million directions. Everyone their own private Idaho, everyone completely able to project their own fears, hopes, dreams, phobias, obsessions with such crystalline, hard-edged perfection and persuasive realism that the real struggle will be to remain coherent, for the word human to include us all and not exclude anyone. We don't want to divide into those who till the earth, those who went in machine bodies to the stars, and those who downloaded themselves into nanoviruses and disappeared over the edge of the event horizon into the black hole at the center of the galaxy. Maybe we want these things. I like the idea of the human family, whatever its individual expressions and adumbrations, staying with a coherent image. Of course, we're all different, but our commonality is in the bedrock of this planet, something not lightly to be given up, I would think.
Maybe unity is not the way to go.
Well, this I don't have an answer here. This was the issue that hovered over Diaspora, the Greg Egan's novel that's set the most far in the future, because at least 3 forms of human beings had come into existence so diametrically different from each other that they operated basically in complete isolation from each other. I mean, some people became cyborgs, human-machine unions that were essentially immortal and that could cruise the stars and have, cosmic adventures. And then, but what most people did was they became entirely digital. They had no interface to hardware. They simply became streams of electrons living out endlessly adumbrated fantasies in the synthetic realities. And then there was the predictable third group, the earth-centered purists who tilled the soil and had dirt under their fingernails and actually had sex to procreate rather than dial up things out of vats and stuff like that. And I'm sure, but yeah, I mean, people will choose whatever they want, and of course, people will migrate between one group and another. The one thing that all this makes me feel good about is I think it's an expansion of choice, and then, presuming there's some kind of overarching dynamic, whether Darwinian or something else, it will all titrate out in whatever direction it wants to go. One fantasy I've had is that what man could do for the earth is make everything conscious. That Grateful Dead song, "You Are the Eyes of the World." Let every eye lead to a conscious mind. Let the squirrel think, and the squid think, and the bumblebee think. Because for sure, we will artificially create robot simulacrums for ourselves to pass among into the natural world as inhabitants of animal bodies. But why not just bring all animal mind to the threshold of sentience? Could that be done? Well, we don't know, because we don't know upon what foundation sentience rests, whether it requires a certain number of cc's of brain mass, or whether that's a completely preposterous and absurd notion, and that conceivably a paramecium or a housefly or a hummingbird could have a kind of shared intelligence. I mean, everything has its own intelligence anyway, that's the expression of its nature. But imagine a planet-wide community of seamless intelligence where, you could log on to the mind of a coral reef as easily as you could log on to the internet. I think it's going to come down to matters of engineering and design, choice, and what values will be served, and it's a political thing. It's amazing, come back to this thing that this French sociologist Jacques Ellul said. It seems like a very deep statement that we return to it year after year. He said there are no political solutions, only technological ones. The rest is propaganda. And then he explained in a very large book what he meant by these words, political, technological, and propaganda. So the technologies to do almost anything are coming into our grip. What is not clear and less easy to summon is a political agenda, a plan, because we've never planned. We've only been a global society for 40 or 50 years, and the consequences of all this are just beginning to become apparent.